Item 6E is council's consideration of resolution number 2024-46, approving Broomfield's notice of intent to withdraw from the RMMA Community Noise Roundtable and authorizing support for termination of the CNR. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Very quickly, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. The Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport is owned and operated by Jefferson County. On November 12, 2020, City Council approved an intergovernmental agreement for creation of the Community Noise Roundtable. The members are Jefferson County, Boulder County, Arvada, Westminster, Louisville, Superior, and Broomfield. As you all know, the activity at the airport results in many noise complaints from surrounding residents. The roundtable was a recommending entity that was created to try to address those noise complaints, but it has no legal authority to implement modifications to the operations of the airport. As you've likely seen in the news, lawsuits have been filed by residents in the surrounding communities and by members of the Community Noise Roundtable against Jefferson County related to the operation of the airport. The IGA that Council approved in 2020 provides for a process to withdraw from the CNR. It requires a resolution by Council and then 30 days notice. Additionally, the IGA also provides a process for termination should a majority of the members agree to terminate the IGA. This resolution before you this evening would authorize the withdrawal from the Community Noise Roundtable, but also authorize, should a vote happen before Broomfield withdraws, for termination of the entirety of CNR. That's all, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers. Next is questions from City Council. Members should limit themselves to questions. Are there any questions from Council? Councilmember Delgadillo.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I do have a few questions just to kind of cover our bases here, especially since we do certainly have residents in Skystone who are seriously affected by this. The first is, do we have record of any of our recommendations being acted on or taken into consideration? Do we have any tangible results from this? Because I recognize that it would be nice to have a seat at the table, but if that seat was never real, then maybe no point beating a dead horse.
I'm okay. Good.
Yes, please. I was just assuming you were going to get up there.
I was, but I just wanted to make sure I had permission.
Absolutely.
Deputy City County Manager Don Davis, also former Jefferson County Manager, and worked with the previous airport director to create the Noise Roundtable modeled after Centennial Airport. The quick answer is no. There's lots of things that get discussed, but part of the reason of the roundtable is to gain consensus, because the FAA will not even consider ideas or thoughts or suggestions unless there's consensus between the community and the surrounding area. So that's kind of one of the reasons and one of the purposes behind the roundtable is to get united effort to make a suggestion, and then the FAA will take under consideration the recommendations made. And oftentimes it will take years for them to run through the environmental studies and the things that they have to do in order to change flight patterns because of the many, they all have effects. If you change one, has a trickle effect all the way around. You change, and that's what recently happened when they did a modification to the flight path for Denver International Airport, which affected a lot of the other airports, and they had to steer some things around.
Okay, thank you for that. And then one more is, are there any negative potential ramifications for us to lobby or to kind of get some actual change? Because we all know, like, we do not control the FAA, right? That is completely above us. But does this withdrawal have any impact on our ability to negotiate or lobby or get stuff done? Or is there any impact we can see?
No impact.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Are there any legal concerns of liability for us for withdrawing similar to other withdrawals?
No.
Okay. Right. That's all. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from Council? No? Oh, Councilmember Cohen, sorry.
Just one, just to follow up on Councilmember Delgadillo's question. and I don't know if Councilmember or Mayor Pro Tem, excuse me, since he's been on the committee, would want to address it. If we do withdraw, and what tools do we have? I know, I understand, I'm hearing from you, this has been a toothless exercise.
Probably, so again, Don Davis, Deputy City County Manager. My recommendation, my experience has been, is you talk to your senators and congressmen and women, and they share their concerns with the cabinet members and the administration. I remember having the director of the FAA at the airport before we formed a roundtable, and it's why we formed a roundtable, because he said that in order to get the FAA to even take some, you have to get consensus, and it's really hard. I think Mayor Pro Tem will share with you that from the very first meeting, couldn't get the communities to agree. Barely could get them to agree on the IGA, let alone the other things are going on. We would have meetings on noise, and the night before, the same council that was expressing frustration with noise approved a new community to be constructed right underneath the flight path. So it's really hard to get consensus when those types of things are happening.
Resolution number 2024-46, approving Broomfield's notice of intent to withdraw from the Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport Community Noise Roundtable and authorizing support for the termination of the CNR.
Thank you. Is there a motion, Mayor Pro Tem Shaff?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Ward.
Second the motion.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Mayor Pro Tem Shaff.
Thank you, Mayor. So in 2020 and 2021, I advocated along with the Broomfield Council members to join the efforts to form a CNR RMMA to not only support Broomfield residents that were affected, but also support our surrounding jurisdictions, most notably Superior. At that time, there was hesitation of joining this effort as there had been little complaints filed with council members, especially council members in Ward 2. And in fact, I received more emails after we joined the CNR or while we were discussing joining the CR about how this was a waste of time and taxpayer money. The direction of council at that time, and has continued to be, to balance the needs of the community as well as the business interests surrounding the airport. The CNR got off to a rocky start and has continued to remain rocky. And I say this as both a alternate, as a member, and as the current chair of the CNR. We discussed a lot of issues in the 3 years since formation, but we saw little recommendations result in action by the airport or Jefferson County. Through 2 consultants, we worked for 2 years on a work plan that contained 2 big efforts, a Part 150 study and the visual flight routes. The Part 150 study it measures or it models the noise surrounding the airport. The Part 150 study was disregarded by the airport, the former airport director and Jefferson County for much of 3 years as they didn't want to pay for it. The former airport director said the best tool to mitigate noise was the VFR study, the visual flight routes. However, not long after working with the consultant, the transcript of a conversation with the airport director was released where he stated, "I want them to waste their money and time because here's the deal. Centennial Airports had a noise roundtable for 20 plus years. Nothing gets done. It just makes people feel happy and they're part of the roundtable and they get to bitch." Quote, end quote. These statements by the former airport director hired by Jefferson County weren't the first instances where a lack of trust within the CNR was demonstrated, and it wouldn't be the last. After congressional pressure and a willingness by the FAA, the Part 150 study process was started with Jefferson County applying for federal grant funding. I even volunteered to be on the selection committee for the consultant. My hope is this study continues to move forward, as this is an important tool for RMMA, the surrounding communities, and most notably for our residents in Skystone. There is a lawsuit right now that's been filed by Superior and Boulder County against Jefferson County and RMMA. This, of course, has contributed to the openness or the lack of openness to dialogue within CNR, and will continue to do so until this court battle is complete. But most recently, after months of delay, the visual flight routes consultant provided the final report on their study. We've been waiting for this since December, and finally they filed their final report report on the noise, the study of the noise-sensitive areas, the training areas, which are mainly to the north. There are some to the south, and we were looking at an additional training area to the west. They also looked at the ingress and egress routes and their conversations with the FAA. That was the big delay, was their conversations with the FAA and the report back. However, this process was not completed because the FAA needs additional time to investigate and study the routes. But no further action on this will happen because, and this was a $60,000 consultant study that was completed, but no further action on this study will continue as Boulder County and Louisville and Superior, and I should have said Lafayette, but Superior was abstained from that vote. But they said they would not support the VFR route in the end, which meant that because we didn't have consensus of all those communities, it killed that entire conversation and that consulting work. So it halted any further work on this issue. I recently met with the FAA, and they said there were other avenues for us to pursue noise mitigation from RMMA, ranging from the CNR, which we had done, the congressional advocacy, which we have been doing, and a working group, which has not been tried, but that is something that they're working with in Centennial and seeing some progress on. And of course, there is the last resort, or in some jurisdictions, the first resort, which is the courts. So at this point, the CNR is dysfunctional. It's lacking support from our community. It's lacking support from many communities. It's lacking trust, which is a big thing in this group, and it's lacking a cohesive route forward. So I would suggest that Broomfield withdraw from the CNR. And as chair of the CNR, I will be echoing these same sentiments at our meeting next week, where we will have on the agenda item to discuss and vote on the termination of the RMMA CNR. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Ward?
Thank you, Mayor. I also would like to echo my colleague, Mayor Pro Tem Shaff's comments, and implore my council colleagues to vote yes to leave the CNR. One of the biggest complaints I receive from residents in Skystone is they feel hamstrung by this CNR because every time they try and go and advocate somewhere else, they are told, go to the CNR. And so I think at minimum we can remove that hamstring for those residents, and for those residents in Skystone in particular listening. I will continue as I always have every time I go to DC and meet with legislators at the federal level to advocate for changes to FAA policy to allow impacted communities to not be quite as impacted. So with that, I implore my council colleagues to vote unanimously yes for this.
All right, thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, next is council's consideration of the, no, that was discussion. Yeah, that's where we are. That was discussion, right? So, okay, council, please cast your vote electronically. Thank you. All council members have cast their vote, and it passes unanimously, 8-0.